Thanks a lot. Let me know if everybody can hear me all right. Sometimes I have a bit of a quiet voice. But it's an honor to be here. Thanks to all of you for coming. I'm truly humbled by this experience. So I'll get right to it. I'll speak for probably about 15 minutes or so. I guess Noah here will ask me a few questions after that, and then I think we'll do some question and answers with you guys. Please feel free to ask any question you want. And I'm psyched to be here. So, the Tour de France, arguably the world's most difficult athletic event, is 21 days of racing over 2,500 miles on some of the world's most punishing roads. It's like running a marathon every day for 3 weeks. I raced the Tour de France 8 times and put every ounce of energy into that race. Getting to that final finish line in Paris was a feat in itself. But during those years, finish lines were not the only lines being crossed. Cycling had a dark side, a side I wasn't ready for, and one that pushed me over a line I thought I'd never cross. And once on the other side, there was no going back. It was the beginning of a double life, filled with secrets and lies that would destroy me from the inside long after I left the sport. Johnny Cash once said, "Lies have to be covered up, but truths can run around naked." This is my story about lies and the truth, and what happens when you compromise your values to chase a dream. How one bad decision can snowball into so many more. It's also about realizing that no matter how bad things get or how impossible a situation seems, there's always a way out. When I began racing, I realized I had a special ability to endure pain. It might sound strange, but pain is something I'm good at. It comes from my family. My dad would tell me when I was younger, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Hamiltons are tough. Another Hamilton trait was honesty. My parents didn't put many demands on us, but the one thing they wouldn't tolerate was lying. Tell the truth or else, no matter what. Tough and honest, with those two traits I thought I could handle just about anything. And when it came to racing, I always knew I could outwork anyone and that I could win at the highest level on grit and a willingness to suffer alone. When I arrived at the top tier of the sport of cycling, I did what I knew best. I worked my tail off, and I never gave up. During that time, there was a word I kept hearing the Europeans say, Paniagua. They'd say, that guy's doing well, even though he's Paniagua. Or, he'll never finish today. He's Paniagua. Eventually, I realized what they were saying was Spanish. Translated to English, it means Paniagua, means bread and water. In other words, racing clean, without any performance-enhancing drugs. Around that same time, I noticed the top guys on our team getting these little white lunch bags from the team doctors after every race. I didn't know what was in them, but I knew I wasn't getting one. Then I figured out what was going on, and that became my motivation to work even harder to prove I didn't need one. But things were about to change. One night, after a tough week-long stage race in southern Spain, there I was in my hotel room, collapsed on my bed, physically depleted, completely exhausted. The team doctors knew I was hurting, and one of them, Pedro Celaya, came in to check on me. He was concerned and sympathetic, almost fatherly. He told me how hard I had worked, how much I had pushed through the pain, and how he admired that in me. He said I had to start taking care of my body, make myself healthier. Pedro always wore this fly fishing vest that had all these pockets. He reached into one of them and pulled out a little red egg-shaped capsule. He said, "Tyler, this is for your health. It's not doping, it's for your health." He handed me the capsule, and there I was, at the crossroads. In or out, yes or no. I swallowed the red egg without much thought. In it was testosterone, a banned substance. Of course, I knew it was against the rules, but I had worked so hard and was so close to my dream of riding the Tour de France that I felt I owed it to myself to look the other way. And I justified it. I told myself everybody was doing it, and it was a necessary part of competing at the top level. But I knew it was wrong, and deep down I was ashamed. But that shame was buried by a new feeling, a possibility. How far can I go? How fast can I ride? How good can I be? In a strange way, it was a badge of honor. It meant the team finally thought I was good enough to get a white lunch bag. Now on the inner circle, I was next introduced to injections of a drug called EPO, or Edgar Allan Poe, as we called it. EPO increases the production of red blood cells, which carry oxygen to your muscles and improve endurance. At the time, EPO was undetectable, and it was fast and easy. A quick swab of the arm, a little injection, and done. Like the red egg, it didn't feel like a big deal. With EPO, we could train harder and longer. And in a 3-week race like the Tour de France, EPO was an absolute game changer. In the beginning, EPO and all the other drugs were given, paid for, transported, and administered by the team. Because it was all done for us, we reasoned it was the team actually breaking the rules, and we, the riders, were just the dutiful employees. That situation changed during the '98 Tour de France when police raided a vehicle of a French team and uncovered a massive amount of doping products. From that point on, it became too risky for the team to handle our doping program. We would now have to do it ourselves. Team management told us the new system was for safety. But now the risk of transporting and border crossing was all on us. Since there would be no EPO in the team cars anymore, how do we get it during the tour? Our team leader, Lance Armstrong, came up with a plan. His gardener, Philippe, or Motoman as we nicknamed him, would zip through the Tour de France circus on his motorcycle and drop off the drugs to an undercover staff member. The staff member would have our syringes waiting for us, sometimes tucked in our sneakers or in our race bags. We would inject quickly, 30 seconds at the most, and stuff the syringe into an empty Coke can. We'd crush the can and make it look like trash, and the team doctor would bury the can at the bottom of his backpack, open the door, and walk past the crowds of fans, journalists, and even police. There we were in one of the world's largest sporting events, injecting banned drugs just feet from thousands of people. People always want to know why we didn't get caught. Weren't there drug tests? Of course there were, and lots of them. But if you follow the doctor's instructions or cheat sheets, None of them were hard to beat. I probably passed hundreds of tests when I shouldn't have. And in the 1990s, there was no test for EPO at all. In the year 2000, that changed. The team was warned by an inside source that an EPO test could be used at the upcoming tour. We needed a new strategy. To work around the EPO test, the team decided to try a safer alternative. A couple weeks before the Tour de France, I boarded a private jet with Lance Armstrong and another teammate and flew to Valencia. Below us, we could see the French Riviera, the mansions, and the yachts. It felt like a fantasy world. When we landed in Valencia, the team doctors and staff members were there on the tarmac waiting for us. As we were shuttled to the secluded hotel, the team doctors told us how easy this new method would be, how safe it was, and how there was absolutely nothing to worry about. What they were talking about was blood transfusions or blood doping. I'd heard about transfusions before, but I couldn't believe athletes actually did them. It's a process where the doctors will extract your blood, store it in a fridge or freezer, and then reinfuse it back into you when your body is depleted. It has the same red blood cell boosting effect that EPO has, only this was natural. But in reality, it was a risky, dangerous procedure with serious consequences if done improperly. Blood transfusions are not the same as swallowing a little pill or getting an injection. Here you're watching a big clear bag fill up with your own warm red blood. You never forget it, and you never get used to it. And when you're leaving in the hands of doctors with questionable pasts, things can go wrong. After one visit, I left the doctor's office in a hurry to catch a flight. Hailing a cab with one arm, I felt a strange wetness on the other. I looked down to see my hand dripping with blood and my sleeve completely soaked in red. It looked as though I'd been stabbed. The hole from the extraction needle hadn't closed. That point in time characterized exactly what my life had become. There I was on a busy street corner in Madrid, hiding behind dark glasses and a baseball cap, paranoid of being seen. In one hand, I'm holding a secret cell phone with code names and numbers, and the other hand is dripping with blood. And down the street, in a backroom clinic, a doctor I don't trust is stockpiling bags of my blood, all for a bike race. People ask me, why wasn't that enough to make you stop it all right then and there? My reality was so twisted by then, I reasoned it was just temporary. My career would be over in a couple years, and once it was done, I'd go back to living a normal life. So there I was, at the top of the pack, cruising up and over the French Alps and Pyrenees, the Italian Dolomites, and the Belgian Ardennes, winning at the highest level in the most famous bike races in the world. I was now the elite of the elite. I'd fulfilled my childhood dream of becoming an Olympic champion. I was living the American dream. My family was so proud. Invitations came rolling in. Ring the opening bell on Wall Street. Throw out the first pitch at a Red Sox game. Nationally televised interviews. These wins, these highs, these accomplishments should have made me feel like I was on top of the world. Yet my life was spinning out of control, and I worried more about getting caught than I did about winning. But what could I do? I'd already walked into the casino and rolled the dice. I was in over my head. There was no turning around and no way out. And then it all came to a screeching halt. It was the second week of the 2004 Tour of Spain. I was at the peak of my cycling career, and I got the news. I'd failed a drug test. Oh, you can change this. Another person's cells were detected in my blood. I assumed that the blood bags had been mixed. It was a mistake that could have killed me. So there was my opportunity, my moment to finally do the right thing. Tell the truth, take responsibility, leave all this behind, and start my life over again. Instead, with the pressure mounting, I lied. Professional cycling was a brotherhood. We lived by the omerta, a code of silence we all understood. We protected each other, we protected the system. Lying and denying was what I was supposed to do. You get caught, you say nothing, you take one for the team. That's how it was done. If I told the truth, I would have to implicate everyone involved. Dozens of people, many of them my friends, would lose their jobs, and I'd be blackballed from the sport forever. I received a 2-year suspension. For 14 years, I lied to everyone. During that time, I had two faces. One with the person everyone thought I was, and the other, the person I knew I was, a doper and a liar who was unraveling on the inside. I dealt with depression, I abused alcohol, I had suicidal thoughts, and feelings of self-hate that never went away. I was alone and a prisoner of my decisions. I retired in 2009. 6 years after I rode my last Tour de France, a subpoena arrived at my front door. There was a federal investigation underway into Lance Armstrong and the U.S. Postal Service cycling team. I was ordered to testify in front of a grand jury. The choice in front of me was stark. Tell the truth or go to jail. When I walked into that Los Angeles courtroom, I knew what I had to do. From the very first question, the truth came pouring out, and for the next 7 hours, I unloaded more than a decade of lies. The more I talked, the more I realized I had spent the last 14 years protecting a culture that was never worth protecting. In the end, the truth saved me. While my story happened in cycling, every industry has its unwritten rules, its own secret race. Corporate corruption is widespread. Academic cheating is at an all-time high. And a growing number of people in the workplace feel they have to bend the rules to get ahead. Whether the rewards are money, fame, power, personal validation, a promotion, or a scholarship, the pressure to excel is taking its toll. Every day we're presented with red eggs, moments when the lure of success or fear of failure puts us to the test. Should you fudge that number just this once to meet your sales quota? Do you turn a blind eye when your boss overcharges a customer? Do you inflate your resume to get that dream job? I wish I'd been better prepared for that day. Pedro walked into my hotel room. I wish I thought harder about swallowing that first red egg, about where it would lead and how out of control things would get. I wish I knew how numb victories would feel when they were achieved dishonestly. And I wish I knew then that giving back an Olympic gold medal would feel better than winning it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Tyler. That was really fascinating. I just want to take you back, if you don't mind, to that moment when you're on the bed and you're exhausted and Pedro comes into your room. Do you feel that you were exploited in that moment?
He put me in a really tough spot, you know. The Tour de France was a few months away. I knew they wanted me on the Tour de France team. And he knew I had a lot of respect for him. He was kind of like a fatherly figure to me. And yeah, you know, he got the better of me. I let my guard down. You know, I grew up with two great parents, and you know, they taught me the difference between right and wrong, and you know, to always make the right choice, and when I did make the wrong choice, to, you know, get back to the right side of the line. And yeah, so I was young and wide-eyed. And
when do you think you crossed that line from being something of a victim to being a criminal?
You know, I don't consider myself a victim, you know. I mean, I made the choice. I knew, you know, I was an adult. I was a young adult, but I was, you know, it was like...
So I was saying, when do you think that you cross that line between being maybe exploited by people you respect to being someone consciously in control of their actions, doing the wrong thing?
You know, I guess I was always really in control of it. You know, no one ever had a gun to my head. Obviously, you know, back when I started, everybody was, you know, the whole peloton was doping, and they knew that if I wanted to make it to the top, that I was going to have to do that.
And you mentioned also that after taking that pill in that room, there was no going back. But why not? Why couldn't you have just taken the testosterone pill and then said no more?
No, I could have, but you know, it just started with a little red testosterone pill. You know, I did that a few times. Then next thing I know, I was getting introduced to an injection of EPO, and it just started really slowly. You know, at the beginning, you know, that red little testosterone pill was just like a speck of dust on my shoe. You know, by the end, I was really up to my neck in it.
And moving away from you onto Lance Armstrong briefly,
yeah.
Do you feel that he's been vilified and even bullied and made an example of in a way that's at all unfair?
You know, he was the biggest name in the sport. Sometimes the people the highest in the company will fall the furthest, and he's had a tough run at it, that's for sure. But you know, we all have to pay the consequences for sure.
And comparing you to Lance, you know, you're here, people love you, people buy your books, people want to hear what you've got to say. And are you ever surprised by the extent to which you've been accepted after having been persona non grata?
You know, it was tough for me when I first came out with when I first told the whole truth. I was still, you know, a lot of people didn't believe me, but then when really the whole truth came out, I think the book helped a lot. And obviously when Lance finally admitted the truth, I think a lot of people forgave me. And I think at first it was a little bit difficult. You know, my name was black for so long, and there was so much dislike for me. And then people all of a sudden understood the whole situation. And yeah, it wasn't necessarily that easy.
You also mentioned the 2-year suspension. And now when your entire life, your physical life, your emotional life is a sport, how on earth do you cope, both physically and psychologically, with a 2-year period of suspension?
Oh, it was brutal. It was brutal. Hardest. You know, those were 2 hard years, but it continued really. Like it didn't. I came back to the sport for a couple of years. I tried to make a comeback, and I was still persona non grata within the sport. You know, a lot of people didn't want to see me back. You know, my name was black, and I struggled. I struggled for a long time, for sure. Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on something else you said. You said you'd convinced yourself that you needed to dope in order to compete, not in order to win. But do you think that the problem is so widespread that actually it's not a matter of getting an edge, it's a matter of keeping up?
You know, back then it was about keeping up, you know. A lot of my old teammates, guys who were kind of middle of the road cyclists at that level, you know, they complained that if they weren't doing it, they weren't, you know, they were going to be off the back of the race. for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving away from doping briefly, just to talk about cycling more generally before we come to the audience. Do you think that the defensive riding in the mountains, if it carries on the way,
The
defensive riding in the Tour de France, if it carries on in the same way, teams and spectators will turn toward other Grand Tours, or do you think the sort of the lure of the Tour de France?
What do you mean defensive riding?
So that this style of riding, which is perhaps less enjoyable for spectators, in order to protect cyclists, which might draw attention away from what is, as you described, as the greatest sort of competition in the sport.
I don't know. Well, for me, I lived it and breathed it, and I think the team aspect's a lot of fun. Sometimes it kind of dulls the race down a little bit because for example, the way Team Sky rides, they protect their leader, and there's less maybe action because they set such a hard pace at the front. But it's team tactics. They have one guy that they're all working for, Chris Froome, and they do a good job at. They get him to the most critical part of the race as fresh as possible, and then let him go. That's what we used to do for Lance Armstrong, and that's really the way to win the Tour. I guess they could reduce the number of riders per team, and that might make it a little bit more interesting. I'd be in favor of that. Yeah, maybe from 9, maybe bring it down to 7 riders.
My last question before I let you guys have a chance is with regards to the dangers of cycling. The Olympics opened with many exciting things, but also with some really, really nasty falls and broken collarbones. Do you think as slopes get more challenging and as athletes go faster, there's actually an element of risk in cycling which is going far beyond what's appropriate?
There's a lot of risk in cycling, a ton. And I don't know how you're really going to control it, but there's a lot. Dangerous descents, and it's hard to put fences along 120 or 130 miles of a race course. You're constantly taking risks. I'm actually just recovering from an awful accident. I was doing just a charity ride, and I was on a lady's wheel, and she hit a rock and crashed right in front of me, and I had stitches everywhere. And it's a dangerous sport. And there's in that race like the Tour de France, there's 200 of the fittest athletes in the world. On small French roads, and everybody's trying to get to the front. And you're packed in like sardines, and one rider makes a mistake or has a mechanical problem, and you can go down like dominoes, and it's awful. It's awful.
You've been through hell in cycling. What makes you get back onto the saddle?
I don't know. I've always been really competitive. Way less now, but as a kid, I always loved sport. That's I sort of spoke through sport, and I love to compete. And a crash wouldn't for most of those guys, a crash isn't going to slow you down. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Let's take some questions from the audience. If we go to the in the end of the row there.
Do you think that knowing what you know about doping and telltale signs, and I know recently in America there was a big scandal with baseball, do you think, or have you noticed that it's prevalent throughout sport at all elite levels?
I don't think it was a problem just in cycling, that's for sure. Yeah. I think doping is a problem we have in all sports at the top level, to some degree.
Do you think it's almost a necessity?
Not a necessity. It's unfortunate that it's out there, but when there's so much on the line, so much pressure, when there's all that, there's a lot of money on the line, a lot of jobs on the line, a lot of people's lives and careers on the line. People cut corners. So I'd love to see sport with less pressure. I don't know how it's possible, but it'd be great.
Just picking up on something he was mentioning, do you think there are telltale signs though? Can you look at an NFL game or an NBA game and say what that guy's doing is not normal?
Yeah, I can't really speak for other sports. I'm not a American football player, but
or even within cycling. Then.
Yeah, but within cycling, I don't know. I used to be there are some telltale signs. I think it was always interesting to see just someone kind of come out of nowhere, just get amazing results and then sort of go away. that was sort of a sign. That doesn't guarantee that they're doping, but there are signs like that, or just incredible speeds, going up some of these climbs.
Let's go to the guy in the far corner there, ginger hair.
As I'm sure you're aware, the level of public trust within cycling is probably at an all-time low. Do you think it is possible to return to a level where the public believe that the riders in the Tour are clean? And I mean, is it a case of banning for a lifetime riders that have been convicted of doping? Because I'm sure you're aware there are riders that ride within the Tour today that are previously convicted of doping, and the public suspect them maybe of doping again. Do you think it's possible to return to that level of trust?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's going to certainly take some work. That's a great question. It's going to take some work, that's for sure. We need to still focus on anti-doping. It didn't just go away in 2006, like a lot of people said, or in 2007 or 2008. It's obviously still around. Guys are still getting caught. But we need to, a lot of people in the sport, just assumed, okay, it's over, it's clean now. But we know that's not totally true. So anti-doping's key, and these World Anti-Doping Agency and all the national anti-doping agencies need more support. We need more testing. If we had a test that can you imagine if we had a test that, that took a blood or urine test and could detect what's been put in your body for the last 6 months? That would be incredible. In these days, you can still blood dope. You can still microdose with EPO. Still takes, small amounts of testosterone. The same thing I was doing way back when. You can still take cortisone, under the TUE system. So I think we've got to crack down even harder. It's not over. So, yeah, and it's unfortunate the public's not happy with the sport of cycling today, that's for sure.
Was there someone you wanted to go to? Sorry, you just
I don't know. It's just,
okay,
yeah.
let's go to the guy in the... Yeah, here, blue shirt.
Hi. I'd like to pry a little bit more into the culture of doping and who it was specifically led by. You mentioned a lot of things about competition being your motivation for doping, but there's also a lot of allegations by Floyd Landis, Betsy Andrew, others that indicate, it was more of a culture of the leader, perpetuating the culture of doping. Do you think that, you rode with Lance for 3 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Do you think this culture of doping was really driven by him, or was it driven by the competition itself to be better and to, be the best you possibly could be?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, I don't think, Lance was, the one that really pushed. I started doping before I was teammates with Lance. I was teammates with Lance for 4 years. I probably, the whole Motoman thing with, bringing EPO in the motorcycle, that probably wouldn't have happened if, Lance wasn't around. I probably wouldn't have blood doped for that first time had Lance not been around. But, doping had started long before Lance Armstrong got to the pro ranks,
Sure, but what about other leaders in cycling as well? Other team leaders?
I'm sure that, I would just assume that they were, pushing to have a strong team, and that required, crossing the line in a serious way, doing things like EPO, blood doping. But I wouldn't say it's their fault. I think it was in the sport for a long time, a really long time. Lance, I think, arrived in the professional side of cycling in 1993. Yeah, and doping had been going on for a long time before that. I don't know. Anything else?
Just was the culture perpetuated by the team leaders, I guess, in your opinion, which contributed more?
I'd say the culture. The culture contributed more. It was there. When I arrived in 1997, I've been a pro for 2 seasons before, kind of racing more domestically in the States. And then I arrived in the big leagues in 1997. That was when I first did my first Tour de France. And and that's when I realized, wow, it's everywhere. They're handing out white lunch bags to, full of, performance enhancing drugs to guys. At the race. They were bringing it to the race. That's how open it was, It was like nothing. No one was stressing about it, you know. All the staff members weren't stressing that it was, you know, in the back of their in the team bus, you know. Obviously, once that Festina affair happened in 1998, that's when everyone was like, "Whoa, we got to hide this stuff. We can't, you know. You guys kind of got to do it yourselves. And we'll teach you how to do it, but like we got to keep this little quieter, you know." Secret cell phones started happening, you know, stuff like that. Before it was like the Wild West, you know. Before the Festina affair, it was just wide open, prevalent, and it was like it was pretty in your face.
It's interesting. You talk about the normalization of doping and, well, rather use of performance-enhancing drugs. Is there a part of you that thinks as long as these substances are safe, that they should be legal within the sport?
No, I don't think they should be legal. I mean, what's that telling the younger generation, you know? So if young kids are watching Tour de France riders and they know they're taking this, this, and this, you know.
But I suppose it's a fine line between, you know, doing
I
many
mean,
of the other
regular
crazy
vitamin-
things Olympians do, and, you know, if they're on certain diets and they're using creatine and they're,
Yeah.
you know, really what's the difference maybe between the odd testosterone pill and other sort of powders they're mixing with their milk or whatever it is?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know, if it's not good for you, I don't think you should be doing it. That's for sure, you know. I mean, we got to think about the younger generations, the kids, you know, little kids now, because, like, you know, they're going to be racing in the Tour de France before we know it. And if we got to keep it on the straight and narrow. Yeah, for sure.
Take another question. There's a hand at the back there, a guy with glasses.
Hi. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more about what Lance Armstrong was like as a guy to train with, and do you think he was the best doper out there, or do you think he was a very talented athlete and everyone was doping, and he was a better athlete and that brought him success?
Great question. Lance was definitely intense. I've never met anybody like him. You know, for me, winning was nice. It was great when it happened, you know, but second was also nice and pretty awesome too. You know, for Lance, it was, you know, second was awful. You know, it was all about winning. He had this intensity like I've never seen. He was a great athlete. Very hardworking. Obviously, he doped. You know, I guess he doped pretty deep. You know, like myself and like a lot of others. But yeah, great athlete. You know, got it mixed up in it just like I did, and you know, kind of went above and beyond sometimes, just in terms of, you know, winning at all costs. Yeah.
Great. And just one more.
Yeah, sure.
The recent allegations about Team Sky, you mentioned these TUEs earlier. I was just wondering what you thought about this story that Bradley Wiggins took these injections for medical uses just before these major events, and whether you think Team Sky in general can be trusted.
Yeah, that's a tough question. You know, he did everything he did was legal. You know, that we know. You know, whether or not it was ethical or not, you know, that's sort of up for debate. You know, it's really too bad. It's too bad that, you know, what we found out, it was, you know, it was taken during 3 of his big target races. So that was a bit eye-opening, you know, just days before. So that was a bit eye-opening. And, you know, Team Sky has in the past said that they're, you know, a clean team, a very ethical team, and it's put that into question a little bit. But, you know, I think they're doing an investigation of some sort, and hopefully we'll get some more answers. But, and yeah, hopefully we'll hear the truth. Good question.
There's a girl over there.
I'm kind of leading up to the first question, and I was wondering if you think that, like, there's a reason to which the Formula 1 drivers were, like, less affected maybe by doping and less, like, looked after for doping, and whether, like, Niki Lauda and James Hunt were also, like, involved in this, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Formula One, but I do know that cycling is definitely the amount of testing they do is way more than most sports. They pretty much lead the way in anti-doping.
Do you think there's a reason for this, like a particular reason? Or?
It comes down to the governing bodies, all the different sports. I won't mention the sport, but it was one of the top 4 sports in America, and they're a big chief there. I was at a conference, and their big chief said, because I was there, and there was a bit of controversy that I was there, and a journalist asked this guy, "Is doping a problem in your sport?" And they said, "Yeah." He said, "We don't have a problem of doping in our sport," which is, they barely do any testing, and I'm sure that's not the case. Yeah. It comes down to the governing body of each sport, and each sport just does things differently. Some sports, they don't think they have a problem. In cycling, if you go back 20 years, did they think there was a problem? Probably not. But it was, at that time, 20 years ago, it was a big, massive problem. It was terrible.
So do you see other sports coming into the same kind of trouble maybe in 10, 20 years that cycling is experiencing at the moment?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you don't start dealing with it now, they're going to...
Any sports in particular you see that happening with?
You can probably guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll leave that to your imaginations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Did you want to add something? Sorry.
One of that blood doping doctor that I worked with in Spain, he said he worked with soccer players, or football players as you guys call them, tennis players, track and field athletes, cross-country skiers.
Wow.
So.
There's a question over here.
It was just something Noah touched on. I was wondering about your opinion. I read a sports editorial that was talking about EPO. I know a bit about that because I'm a doctor, but they were comparing it to what some athletes do, including Chris Froome, in terms of exposing themselves to high levels of oxygen deprivation in sort of oxygen tents and things like that in order to naturally boost their red cells, whereas EPO is doing it unnaturally, although it's a pharmacological natural substance. I was wondering what your opinion was of the difference that the article was sort of trying to...
So the difference between
EPO... one's illegal, one's not, but they're both doing the same thing.
Yeah. So I think, you're talking about the difference between EPO and just training at altitude, or training in an altitude tent. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a big difference. One's illegal and one's legal. Yeah. You can either live up at altitude for 3, 4, 5 weeks or longer and get that kind of benefit, or you can, sleep in some sort of altitude chamber in like a tent. And we did that too during my career. One's legal, one's not. It's a bit unfair. It costs money if you live at sea level and you're an athlete but doesn't have a whole lot of money. It's almost impossible to go away for a long time to train at altitude, or to buy or to rent an altitude tent of some sort. But how can you control that? How can you say you can't go up to altitude? You have to let that be legal. I think some countries actually made altitude tents illegal. So
do you think then the act of cheating, it's less on the outcome, but rather it's on the means? So the fact that it's maybe requires more effort and energy and time to trade at altitude means it's not cheating, whereas injecting yourself with something is so easy and quick, it is cheating if the outcomes are the same.
Yeah. Well said.
Good.
Well said.
Sorry, I'm not here to give answers.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
Yeah, great. Let's go right to the back on the left.
I'm curious, for such an extended period of time working with your team and the wider peloton, after being one of the early movers in sort of exposing the unwritten or the unspoken sort of code, what life and relationships look like after that for you with guys that you spent most of your early years developing?
Yeah. Most of it's pretty broken, I'd say. Yeah. Yeah, you know, a lot of my old teammates, I just don't see them anymore. I'm just different lives, you know, living in different areas. We don't ever really cross paths at all. I'm sure if we crossed paths, we'd be at least cordial. But yeah, a lot of people weren't so happy with me, and, you know, weren't happy that the truth came out. But that's all right, you know. I think it's much better to tell the truth than to save a friendship or something like that. It was necessary, you know. My whole career, when I was doping, I always thought this is way too big of a secret for it not to come out, because you know, when I first started in 1997 doping, like, you know, the majority of the peloton was doping, and I always thought this one day will come out, and yeah, I guess I was sort of part of that process of doping coming out, the whole truth coming out. And yeah, it's changed a lot of my relationships with the old teammates. Or, you know, I've had to testify in many different cases. I had to testify in the case, that whistleblower case with Lance Armstrong. I've had to testify against old doctors and directors. I've had to do a lot of stuff like that. I had to spend a lot of time in court or doing it via video. I just did one a couple weeks ago with the Johan Bernil and Pedro Celaya and this guy, Dr. Pepe Marti, or not, it's not a doctor, but Pepe Marti. Yeah, but it's what I have to do. It's, you know, I was a part of it, and I feel that I have a responsibility to just continue to be truthful, and if there are questions that need to be answered, I'll answer them.
Do you think it will end, you know, soon?
And I call it the gift that keeps on giving, because it like just doesn't go away. But
yeah,
you know, I got myself into this mess, so you know, it's the right thing to do, and I need to do it. And so.
But do you think you'll be answering questions for juries and for investigations until you're in your old age?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But hopefully we can talk about just positive things that, you know. But yeah, if that's the case, so be it. I'll do it. Yeah.
Let's take a couple more questions. There's a woman on the edge over there, Aidan, just to your left. Yeah.
Hi. Can I just say, did you spend a lot of time thinking, what if everyone had been clean? Where would I have got to? Where would Armstrong have got to? Did you, or are you over that now, or does it still preoccupy your thoughts?
You know, I've thought about it. Yeah. I'm not consumed by it. You know, it's just, I've kind of just moved forward and past it all. It would have been fantastic if that was the case. If everybody was clean, we got to see who truly was the strongest and all that. I think you still would have seen a lot of the same guys towards the top, but I don't think it would have been exact. You know, a lot of people have asked, you know, would Lance have won 7 tours? I would guess no. You know, would he have won one? Yeah, probably. You know, or maybe not. I don't know. I hope I would have done well, you know, but who knows? You know, I did pretty well when I was clean. You know, I won some big races, but racing at the Tour de France level was a whole different story. But yeah, it would have been interesting. It would have been fun, and you know, I wish I had, you know, said no to Pedro and told him where to stick that red egg. But you know, I didn't. I wasn't strong enough. I kind of just played into the game, and you know, I was new and wide-eyed and super excited to even have the opportunity to just get on the start line in the Tour de France. You know, I had no idea where it was where it was going to lead. You know, I thought I was going to. That first Tour de France in 1997 was my first and only time that I was going to do the tour. I told my parents, I was like, "You got to come over and watch, but come early because I don't know if I'll finish." You know, and then it was just okay. I finished that year, then I did another year, then another year. You know, I took my final semester off from college to race on the U.S. national team. And I thought, okay, I'll be in school, you know, the following fall, but it just never I kept postponing college, and before I knew it, I was, deep into a Tour de France career.
Do you still go back to France?
No,
No,
no.
just done with that now.
Yeah, I love France. France is awesome, and the Tour de France is a great race. It's fantastic. It's the hardest, I think, sporting event in the world. And that's one of the problems. Maybe they could make it a little bit easier. No, really, but a couple of years ago, maybe it was more than a couple, but they Alpe d'Huez is one of the toughest climbs in France, and the last day before the day to Paris, they did Alpe d'Huez twice, not once. It would have been hard enough on the last day to do it once, but they did it twice. And to me, that was just over the top. Over the top.
Do you think there's a commercial aspect to that, though?
Oh yeah, they love it. There's a big commercial aspect to it. Yeah. One time they made us ride over the thing called the Passage de Bois, and it was like, I think, 3/4 of the day it's underwater, and then during very low tide it's out of water, and they made us race across it, for television, I'm sure. And it was slicker than ice. So we hit that thing going 60 kilometers an hour because everybody was trying to get to the front. The first 20 guys made it through, and then everybody else just slid like ice. And some guys went into the ocean. It was crazy. I don't think they've ever raced across it since. But spectacle.
Guy right at the back, really enthusiastically stretching.
Thank you, Tyler, for your comments. They've been very insightful, and I'm sure everyone in the room appreciates it. I had 2 quick questions, if you'll indulge me. First, I was curious and just going back to your last comment about the format of the Tour de France, do you think in its current form it's possible for an athlete to compete and to do it as they currently do it and not be doping, or is it just too physically demanding on the human body?
Yeah. That's a great question. I can't really speak for today. I've been long away from the sport at the Tour de France level, so I can speak for when I was racing, and yeah, it wasn't possible to win the Tour de France clean. Not even close. I hope today it's possible, but I don't know.
Go to the girl on the corner there.
Good question.
When you're describing how you got into doping, I can entirely imagine that most people would do the same as you, put in your situation, being that good at cycling, having that pressure, blah, blah, blah. I was wondering if you've forgiven yourself.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for the most part, sometimes I think I'm a little hard on myself, for sure. But, I've always kind of been tough on myself. But no, I did a lot of bad things for a while, so, and I do talk about it every once in a while, and it kind of reminds me of what I did. And sometimes, I got a little nervous here. It feels like I was in confession,
Sorry.
No, it's all good. I did these things, so. But yeah, for the most part, yeah. Yeah. I think I have a little ways to go. Yeah. I do talk about it a bunch, and not a whole lot of guys talk about it, and sometimes I feel like I'm speaking for the whole generation of riders, during the dark days, because not a lot of guys have come forward with the truth, that they don't, but a lot don't really. They've just kind of done what they had to do, and then moved on. So, but I do think it's important to talk about it. It's if we don't really figure out what happened in the past, how it happened, and why it happened, we're gonna go through the same thing again.
So I think I probably owe you a drink now after that. So Tyler might be around for a few more minutes just in the bar if you have really pressing questions. I know you really wanted to get your second in. So
I'll get you. Yeah.
I'm sure Tyler
Great
won't mind.
questions, you guys. Great questions, and thanks for good listeners and. Yeah.